Hello peeps, it's Mishka here. So today let's examine the symbols and the symbolism behind the High Priestess in the RIder-Waite Tarot Deck. What I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on certain elements in the first part, and those elements, they're going to be showing you the differences or examining differences between the Magician and the High Priestess, how both they correspond with each other on a tree of life, the Hebrew associated letter with the High Priestess, the way how High Priestess kind of sits within the tree of life, the pose of the High Priestess and the positioning, and also the number 2 and the duality that is kind of percolating across the entirety of the card. The funny part about the Rider-Waite and its numerical setup and the way how they choose to do it, because 4 is representing 0, what I would like to mention that Hebrew letter Gimmel is third in a Hebrew alphabet, but the High Priestess is represented by Roman numerical 2. That little things like it across all systems, so not all of it we can see consistency, because sometimes our human nature is all about making things fit into our beliefs, but this is not about that. I just want to kind of concentrate on the symbols and symbolisms, but I would like to just very briefly to point that out. So if we're going to look at the High Priestess in contrast in Magician, if we're going to look at the Magician, he's standing, his arms being stretched, and I think you have gathered thus far. I always use my Hermetic lens. I'm very much a proponent of Hermetic principles. So he's kind of showing us above, so below, us within, so without. That is this kind of, his pose is representing this. When it comes to the High Priestess, she's sitting, she's fronting us. We don't see much of her. A lot of is being covered, and this is quite often when we come to tarot. I would say have a good look at things that you can see, as well as notice things that you cannot see. And within the High Priestess, the only thing that we can see is her throat, is her face, and her left hand. And I'm going to touch on it. So also, when it comes to the Magician, as when it comes to the High Priestess, we don't see each of the legs. We don't see the movement. So we don't know how Magician is doing his magic, apart from he's the conduit and conductor. He's the channel of that crown energy coming from Kether within the Tree of Life. That Seraphet that is representing this consciousness pouring into our reality, and the Magician is very much representing the masculine aspect of it. Is represented by the Roman numerical 1 that is very phallistic within its nature, and then the Magician itself is kind of representing number 1. He's holding the white double-tipped white wand that is also very phallistic within its nature, very masculine. So, and within the Tree of Life, he sits within the Seraphet that is called Binach, and Binach it's representing the desire. It's understood as a desire. And to explain the difference between the Magician and the High Priestess, I'm going to jump a bit. It's kind of between the Tree of Life and those two, and the two Seraphets and duality. So bear with me, please. So the Magician is representing the number 1. High Priestess is representing number 2, Roman number 2. So we have the 1 that is duplicating itself. And if we're going to look at the Tree of Life and we're going to look at the High Priestess, we can see that within the High Priestess within the imagery of the High Priestess, there's a Tree of Life kind of hidden within it. So that is one thing about the occult, is hidden in a plain sight. It's not like we look at it but we don't see it. It's all about learning how to see the unseen, kind of. And the High Priestess is very much about what is not there to be seen, and it's quite a lot of things that are not being seen when it comes to High Priestess, and she's kind of emphasizing this kind of message quite a bit. So the Magician is representing this very masculine aspect of the material universe, where the High Priestess is going to be representing this very feminine aspect. And when we see the Tree of Life, the Binah and the High Priestess sits within the Chokhmah, the Sefer that is called Chokhmah, and I'm going to explain in a minute. They're mirroring each other. So this is all about the duplication. This is all about the polarity. So this is, and within the most basic understanding of Kabbalistic Tree of Life, the Magician is the desire, and the High Priestess is the will. And in order for something come to being, we need to have two, and this two is giving birth to new, let's put it that way, new quality, something absolutely new. So, and this duality, this reflection, when it comes to the Tree of Life, we see it percolating across the entirety of the High Priestess card, because we see the Roman numeral 2, that's a duplication of 2. We see within those two columns Boaz and Yahim. The Boaz is representing the female aspect. Is the female aspect in ancient times was understood as this birthing place of new things, and it was understood as chaos. And we can see quite a bit of it within, and it's very much strongly emphasized within the Greek mythology, the chaos, that element of chaos where everything kind of emerges from chaos. And then we have Yahim, that is representing the masculine, and it's representing the order. So, and as you can see, we have those two elements, those two contrasting forces, plus minus the darkness and the light. Between those two, the third quality emerges, and there's the High Priestess. There's a third element here. Kind of, we can see it from that perspective. And then when it comes to the veil behind her, we see the pomegranate, and we see fruit of pomegranate, and we see the elements of the palm tree. Pomegranate is representing the female aspect, and the palm tree is representing the masculine aspect. So the duality is kind of running through this card quite a bit, as you can see. And we can see it as within the Tree of Life, because the Binah, it's kind of has its counterpart within the Chokhmah, and apparently there are two opposites coming from the same force. So this consciousness, if you're going to call it divine, whatever we choose to use to describe this force, it's percolating, it's kind of pouring itself into material plane. Tree of Life has two kind of columns, and that is the duality, and how this duality is coexisting, intertwining with one another, and on the end of the day, it creates one. So that's why I would like to kind of focus when describing the High Priestess. And I think you have noticed that I'm using High Priestess as my own avatar. I have very strong connection with her. I see her maybe from a little bit different perspective than other people. She's an archetype, so we can see across the entirety of literature in relation to tarot and occult, there are different archetypes being used to explain the High Priestess. We see everything from the ancient Egypt to the Greek mythology, through Pope John to now. And quite often what we're seeing, she's associated with chastity, virginity, the Mary, the mother of Jesus, the Immaculate Conception, Virgo Intacta, meaning virgin. There was this belief in ancient times that women, they have this ability to be oracles, to communicate between the divine and because there were virgins, and when women were losing their virginity, that kind of ability was coming to the pass. And that is true. That is absolutely that's how things were done in Egypt as well as Greece. We can see quite a bit. This, when it comes to the historical sources and literature, equally there's another element of communication within the with divine, and we can see it in India because we can see it in tantric sex. Quite often in Middle East, in pre-Islamic times, in temples there were priestesses who were practicing so-called sacred prostitution, and they were allowing or helping to connect with divine through what we would call now sex magic. So because I always going to use this hermetic lens, you see there are always two sides to one coin, and all truths, they're nothing but the half-truths, and all is a paradox. So many roads that leading to Rome, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So what I would suggest, be open to different interpretations and be open to different perspectives and kind of look from different angles, because quite often when it comes to tarot and when people are learning about tarot, there's kind of almost like a set way of seeing things, like, I don't know, this orthodoxy, how things should be. And I can understand that. Surely life is about exploring, and I will be one who would always encourage you to explore things and take everything that I'm saying with the pinch of salt. I'm here to just provoke the food for thought, nothing more. So that's the aspect of the High Priestess and the archetype, and she, for me, it's all about, if I see her in my mind's eye, she's somebody who is, I'll be honest, getting high and kind of experiencing different state of consciousness. And that is something that I decided to do. That was my path. I decided to, many months ago, to embark on the journey with ayahuasca, and I'd done it for quite a bit, and then and I can understand certain aspects of that card a little bit better. And also because I started my journey with Kabbalah when I was 16, 17. I can understand it from intellectual standpoint of view. Do I actually understand it? God, no. I'm not going to pretend I do. But this kind of psychedelic experience really helped me to understand certain aspects. And also we can see it across the literature, and we can see it across the written history or oral history that kind of was preserved. When it comes to Kabbalah, a lot of things that we understand when it comes to Tree of Life comes through expanded states of consciousness, and they were quite often induced by some kind of agents. And when we have a Tree of Life is not exclusive to only to Judaism and Judaistic mysticism. We can see the mentioning of the Tree of Life within the ancient Egypt. There is the Acacia tree, and there was this goddess called Lucette, and she was understood as a grandmother of all Egyptian gods and goddesses, and the bark of her tree was highly hallucinogenic. And most of the mystical experiences, like a burning bush or other things that mystics, Jewish mystics, they were experiencing, are most likely were because of using certain substances that were able to expand the consciousness, and they were using different types of techniques to expand this consciousness. So sometimes it was via diversion, via extreme trauma, so on and so forth. So I would like to kind of highlight it from that perspective. So what we have the pose of the High Priestess. We can see that she's fronting us. She's not sitting on a throne. Most likely what she's sitting under, she's in contrast to magician, she's within a temple. Even though the letter Beth within the Hebrew alphabet is associated with the house and house of God, the High Priestess is within the house of God, because this those two columns, they are the understanding is this is the depiction of the Temple of Solomon. And she's sitting in a house of God, so she's communicating, and presumably she's sitting in a Holy of Holies, so she's communicating with that divine source. And even though the magician is understood as a body of God, the house of God, her Hebrew letter that's associated with her is called Gimmel, and Gimmel stands for letter G. It's representing number 3, and the funny thing about the Gimmel, because there's so many different interpretations what Gimmel it stands for. Some understand it traditionally as they understand it as a food, or is to believed to be person in motion, or symbolically is representing a rich person running after a poor man to give him a charity. Let's put it that way. Within the occult knowledge, this is understood as a camel, and camel is that animal that is able to transport us from point A to point B, something that we trust to take us and our cargo safely. And camel, because it's an animal that's able to retain a lot of water, we see it across the entirety of the card as well, because her gown is kind of floating. There's also association with the moon. That way we have the water element, and we have the moon, so that's why we see camel over there. And because she sits not on a throne, it's understood that she's sitting on the cube, and the cube is kind of now we're going into the realm of the cube of space within the Kabbalah, and we go into, some say it's a Pythagorean, some say it's going to be more Platonic solids. It's just the way how those solids, they're representing different elements of fire, ether. Crowley's tarot deck, we can see the camel, and we can see those solids being depicted within the High Priestess, and she's kind of flashing. She's kind of more I would say multi-dimensional, and this is because this is in relation to Chokhmah, because Chokhmah is the Sephirot within which the High Priestess is kind of residing within the Tree of Life. And Chokhmah is representing wisdom, is understood as wisdom, but actually the best explaining of Chokhmah is something that is in constant flux, that is flashing in and out of existence, has a potential to be and not to be. It's like a traveler between the dimensions, and within the High Priestess we see it quite a bit, because she's not only sitting within the duality between those two columns. So we have this duality from the right to the left, but also there is this travel between backwards, forwards, between the different states of consciousness, and this cross that she bears, she has on her chest. It's also representing this four-way movement, the way how she is kind of moving between the material universe and those dimensions, if that makes sense. So even though she sits still, she's kind of flashing constantly and moving across the different dimensions, if that makes sense. So that's how we can kind of understand, how I can explain the Chokhmah in the best possible way. And the Chokhmah is kind of representing this will, this ability to have a will. So in order to kind of manifest, and the new new quality has to come, we have the desire, that is magician, and we have the Chokhmah, that is the will. And the magician is very phallic, it's very masculine aspect, and the High Priestess is very feminine aspect, kind of in and out, out of reality. Is this kind of duplication here between those two separates, between the Binah and the Chokhmah. So it's like this consciousness, this divine force is pouring itself, and the plane within which is kind of expressing itself is a duality. And duality, we have it within the principle of polarity, where everything is dual, everything has its poles, everything has the pair of opposites, everything has its like and unlike, and they're the same. Basically, the opposites than they're identical in the nature, but different in the degree. And when it comes to truth, in the Hermetic principles, that everything is nothing but half-truths, and all paradoxes might be reconciled because they are part of the same thing. So when it comes to number 2, we can explain it as I can explain it, let's use the yin and yang symbolism. Yin and yang is representing this balance of dualities. They are existing in harmonious way with each other, while they are able to maintain their own intact identities, and they're mirroring each other in a way. And we can see that mirroring within those two columns, Boaz and Yahim, are within the High Priestess. And even though, so High Priestess tell us that something that can appear to be seemingly the opposite, or something that comes across as a contrary force, might be actually complementary. Principles of electricity and magnetism. So we can see it within the nature. We have to have two elements that kind of come together to create this new quality. Moreover, I would like to kind of mention, when it comes to number 2, I would like to mention that quite often the number 2 is linked with the karma. I see karma from a Hermetic lens. I see it as the law, the universal law of the cause and effect, that every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause, everything is happening in according to that law. So nothing is, even though we say that something is happening by the chance, or something is happening out of blue, the fact that we are not recognizing the law, nothing escapes that law, and this is all about the law, because she not only holds that scroll, and that scroll is representing the law, it's representing the aspects of how the material plane is operating. That is one thing, but also she sits on that cube, and cube is also representing the laws of material universe. So this is all about the laws of the universe, how she is reconciling and balancing that laws of universe. And I think what's important to mention, because I kind of touched on the way how she's sitting. If we're going to look at her once again, she's sitting bang in the middle between those two columns. And the idea is that she's not only working with between those two opposing forces, but she's bringing the seemingly contradictory forces together. They are not pulling her apart. She's the balancing. She does this balancing act, and in the way, this is representing this thing that we as a human beings, that is the wisdom. That is the wisdom of Chokhmah. So too much of the good thing is or one thing is not good. Is not. It's all about the balance and finding the balance within ourselves and finding the balance within the life. So pulling too much into the light and pulling too much to darkness, it's not the answer. It's all about pulling them together and blending them together. Also, because she's sitting up front, she's representing this kind of cognitive approach, and she's kind of representing this mental processes. And because if we're going to see, the most of her is covered and the only thing that we can see is the hand, the throat and the face, this is all what we can see. And what we can see quite clearly, we can see her throat. So she hands in her hand, which I'm going to touch later on, she holds the law. Its left hand is representing this feminine aspect, so it's the law of the universe. And she speaks about it, and she's the oracle, so she speaks with certain frequency. So we're here to listen. Representing the higher truth. This is representing the knowledge. And this is also representing to the Hermetic law of frequency, that everything is vibrating. This is all about the frequency and the vibration. And if we're going to say the magician, and the magician wand is the conduit and the channel, she's also the channel between the inner and outer worlds, between the divine and the mundane, but also between the polar opposites, those two forces that are pulling apart and bringing the reality, the material universe together. So she's kind of traveling in that trajectory of to the left, to the right, backwards and forwards. And this is also linked with the cube, and the way how the Kabbalists they're understanding the laws of universe. And apart from the depiction of the tree of life, if I can find it, I will try to find a depiction of the cube here. So that is very important. And basically, also this is representation of the material universe and the ether. And also, she's kind of also representing this idea that about the occult and divine, that it's all around us, it's all available to us, but it's hidden in plain sight. And sometimes when it comes to certain truths, we hear it but we don't want to listen. We look but we don't want to see, or we're unable to see. And the way how we can reach that knowledge and join that knowledge together is not only by reason, but also is also by intuition. So she's here to come to remind us that the knowledge and science and mystical experience, they have to kind of go hand in hand. It's not either or, it's all about the end, if that makes sense. And that's what I would like to kind of focus. Also, when it comes to camel, once again, camel is a traveler. Camel, the walking man, or the Gimmel, the letter G, is representing this movement between different points, and we trust the camel. People were trusting camel to get them safely. So this is all about this moment of transitioning. So she's representing, in those aspects, what I'm trying to say, she's representing those law of universe where duality is giving birth to a new quality, and that quality is to being understood by looking at not only from the perspective of our cognition, but also from the perspective of our intuition.